What is the barrier of entry between you and your contribution? Your contribution to this world, your internal purpose, the thing that gives you life and that gives other people's life. What is stopping you from getting there? And how can you overcome? So the barrier to entry, I think, in a nutshell, is fear. The noise of the world. Fear is an umbrella term, though, under which most all the other barriers reside, such as perfectionism, procrastination, self-doubt, overwhelm, the noise of the world / distraction, lack of inspiration, and disconnection from purpose. We all have a soul and we all have a purpose. That is for sure. But we may be so riddled with demonic agents or a story about our failures, addictions, and regrets that we are like flies caught in the web of life with a great spirit of darkness called fear looming over us, inserting its fangs like a giant spider. Finding a sense of purpose is akin to inspiration, which means we don't control it necessarily. We can't, will a sense of purpose into being. We can't command it. We can't will it into being. I said that already. Just like artistic inspiration, it is spiritual in nature. And like inspiration, it is also a gift from another realm. And we don't control inspiration. Inspiration controls us, you could say, or we call it into being. We call a sense of purpose into being through a life lived on track, a life that sort of keeps resonating with the internal spirit of presence. We can't demand a sense of purpose or be swept up in its momentum at will, but we can do things to cultivate it and cultivate its arrival. Cultivate. We can call it home, call it into us. When we are connected to source or presence or God, we are connected to the source of inspiration and the source of our purpose, along with the faith and the strength then to pursue it. So if we find ourselves trapped in a web of fear, we serve ourselves by looking under the hood of our lives and finding the source of the problem, which invariably, in my experience, is lingering resentment. I think resentment is the engine of stuckness, you could say. I guess it wouldn't be an engine. It's an engine breaking down. Lingering resentments, the spirit of anger, a story of betrayal, or to be blunt about it, hatred. Hatred is what is love's opposite. I don't know. Is that right? Don't they say the opposite of love isn't hate, it's something else? I don't know. It's indifference? I don't know. But anyway, you get my point. It's not love. It's hatred. It's anger that prevents purpose, that prevents inspiration from gifting us into our existence. If we simplify it all, we can determine if we are operating from love or from hate. We don't like to think of ourselves as hateful, but if we dig through the swamps of fear and go far enough down to their source, we will find hatred there and deep resentments that we disallowed ourselves to overcome. Our real nature is, of course, love. That's our ultimate nature. And hatred is a demonic perversion, and that is all. It's too easy for us to be the victim of this infestation of demons, I think. So the starting point of creating a life of purpose and inspiration is, drum roll please, forgiveness. Forgiveness is the key to unlocking the sense of purpose and inspiration in your lives and inviting the flood of divine inspiration to fill us all up. Forgiveness is ground zero, and any victim narrative we are telling ourselves must be routed out and dealt with through the empowering realization that we are responsible for everything in our field of consciousness. So it's the opposite of having a victim mentality. If you feel someone's betrayed you, you sort of come from the starting point of, I am responsible for everything in my field of consciousness. There's no one else that's responsible for what's going on in here. And to heed the biblical teaching that in order for us to be forgiven, we must forgive as well. Forgiveness ultimately is just a decision. You can decide to forgive. And practices like Ho'oponopono can certainly help that decision to be made. Not to go all through what Ho'oponopono is, but for those of you that don't know, it's a simple mantra that is, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. And you direct it at the source of betrayal or what your perceived betrayal is within. You direct it towards that person, towards that source. And in doing so, you're taking full accountability and responsibility for the situation. You're saying to that person, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. You're not saying it directly to them. You're saying it in your own mind to that person within, and you're sort of healing that relationship. It's a way to sort of cultivate forgiveness if you have a hard time just deciding to forgive, which most of us, I think, do. But one can simply decide to forgive and to address within when habits of resentment or victim narratives rear their ugly head. Once you do forgive, you can sort of see those resentments much more clearly when they loom, and you can just deal with them directly. And especially when you know that the source of your stuckness is an inability to forgive. You'll be motivated to forgive because you want to live a life of fun, inspiration, purpose, and energy. The more rooted in ego identity one is, the more difficult this all becomes. So yeah, if you're rooted in the ego thrives on conflict. Stories of separation where the other is bad and the ego is good, or the small you is the righteous one and they're the bad one. But that doesn't really do much for you in terms of getting you unstuck. So simultaneous to making a practice of forgiveness, one also has to be making a practice of presence and doing the work to see beyond the ego's stranglehold on our identity. And so from the foundation of forgiveness, it's much easier to be present, to practice presence, because the chattering mind is calmed way, way, way down. The mind thrives on conflict, so its noise amps way up, and it pushes you away from inspiration and a sense of purpose. But once you do start doing the work of forgiveness, accessing presence is much easier. But this is the only way out of the web of a defeated life. Step one on the path is forgiveness. Spiritual grit blossoms like a flower from the soil of forgiveness. But beyond that, other challenges arise, challenges which can be overcome only after having tapped back into the source of love and our Creator through the gift of forgiveness. Incidentally, I was going to call my book Spiritual Grit. I thought I came up with that myself. And then I was looking yesterday for the spiritualgrit.com, and I came across somebody already has that, and there's already a book called Spiritual Grit. I had no idea. I got to that idea honestly, but I'm going to have to. It's such a good idea, Spiritual Grit. Oh well, somebody got to it first. I'll read their book. I didn't know. So my apologies to you, sir. I can't remember what your name is, but I'm not trying to steal. It was an honest mistake. Once the baseline of forgiveness is established, that really only means you have a chance. That's ground zero, basically. Because from there, all the other demons between you and your life of purpose will flow and arise. But the good news is, having established the relationship with the very presence that enabled you to forgive, it's the same source that will dismantle all the upcoming hindrances on your path moving forward, such as perfectionism, self-doubt, procrastination, they're all kissing cousins of fear. I mean, they're all different ways of saying fear. Perfectionism and self-doubt and procrastination are all just branches on the tree called fear. Different ways fear shows up to the party of purpose that we are all trying to throw. Starting our days, rerouting ourselves into presence with a practice of prayer and meditation is the main weapon in our spiritual arsenal. Get present, because that's really going to be the source that's going to help us overcome. We can't cure the problems of the mind using the mind. We have to sort of go beyond the mind and invite a healing light, a healing power in to clobber all these demons. All the we call the let's see. So yeah, starting our day, rooting into a practice of presence and meditation. We call into the battlefield a force and a power that is beyond us. For in truth, left to our own devices and with the power of our own fragmented and disheveled minds, we don't have a chance in overcoming the spirits leveraged against us. Overcoming ego is vital here, because far from just being a source telling you in clouds of delusion how great you are, it also spends as much time or more telling you that you are an imposter and not worthy of effort or discipline or any kind of love at all. So seeing beyond this imposter becomes easier with practice, and without the fuel or flesh of resentment, the damning thoughts within become more vaporous and easy to see beyond. Through this process, we establish ourselves in presence more and more. And when habitual egoic habits reawaken or interfere, we recognize them and ask the same source of strength that enabled us to forgive to help us now overcome these debilitating habits that took root in our former identity or who we imagined ourselves to be. The internal demons are perfectionism, procrastination, and self-doubt, all branches in the tree of fear. I said that already, but I wrote it, and I didn't know I said that already. I wrote it, so of course my brain is going to do the same thing. Excuse me. All the external demons are the noise of the world, distraction, and overwhelm. I've noticed that in periods when I'm obsessively tuning into social media or too much external content, I have a much more difficult time tuning into the source of my own inspiration. So yeah, I limit lately. I can go down rabbit holes, as we all can, in social media and the news of the world and all the amazing voices, and it's fun. So it takes discipline to not do that. But I realize if I'm just engulfed in media and other content, I don't really have access to my own. It almost makes me feel like what's the point? There's so much noise out there. Paying too much attention to the so-called world means, for me, it's more difficult to tap into source. So yeah, I tread lightly now with my media consumption. Because I sort of have a sense of purpose that I want to fulfill, and that's filling me up. So usually now, if I'm taking in content, it's kind of geared towards more inspiration towards what I'm trying to sort of put out there. And it's also easier to get lost in comparison when you're taking all this stuff in against yourself versus people at the height of their success and influence. So yeah, if you're trying something new, and you're just a baby at attempting to get your voice out there, you're going to be comparing yourselves to people that are well established, who have already have, tons of influence and are seasoned. And that's another, big hindrance, really, because again, it's fuel for the ego to put you down and say, oh, you're never going to be that good, or you're never going to be this, or you're never going to be that. And, you're more likely to imitate then, I think, and sort of get into a tailspin of egoic identity. Having tapped into presence and the source of the real spiritual grit, see, I keep wanting to use spiritual grit because this is before I found out somebody else already got to it. Damn it. But it's still a great concept, spiritual grit. I mean, it's the combination of tapping into the power of presence and sort of making it earthbound and figuring that out. So it's kind of an earthy, I'm going to have to come up with a new term. Spiritual earth. I don't know. Spiritual grit's too good. Bloodied from the battle of forgiveness and fear. Having tapped into presence and the source of real spiritual grit, bloodied from the battle of forgiveness and fear, perhaps when we think we might not make it, the dawn of creative momentum rises in a once darkened sky. So yeah, at first the battle's difficult because at first you're forgiving and you're just tapping into source. But what happens is you find momentum. You find spiritual momentum. You find a seed of your purpose, and you cultivate it almost like an addiction, but a healthy one. With battles fought and our identity being established in presence more and more, we discover new sources of strength and inspiration rise like waves in the direction our creative flow and purpose is moving in. So we get picked up in the wave of our purpose and inspiration. It becomes much easier to ride this momentum. So that's something to look forward to if you're just beginning, or if you're already deep into it, then you know this to be true. There is a momentum that carries us into our purpose and inspiration as we witness ourselves doing things beyond our previous and self-limiting identities. This is amazing. The battle is never over, and the devil has many disguises and is certainly invested in knocking you off course. And the smarter you get, the smarter he gets. So you have to remain vigilant. It's important to do this as a daily practice. I tap into presence usually at the beginning of every day. Breath work is a huge one to tap you into source and to just sort of automatically know that you're not looking to your own egoic strengths, so-called, for the main engine of your creative output and practices. You're already habitually aware that that's coming from presence or beyond your own ego. So daily we tap back into presence and identifying with source. We start to identify with presence more and more rather than ego. For the devil's playground and all the sources of our limitations are rooted in our own minds and the identification with the illusion of our ego. So yeah, overcoming the ego is akin to overcoming our own limitations. One can be rooted in presence with great waves of spiritual momentum working in their favor. But to underestimate the devil and his army of demons, or to think that he will just lay down and die, is fairly naive. We have to remain vigilant. A daily practice establishing our identities in prayer and presence is therefore required to continue down the road of purpose given to us like a gift from the very source we choose to cultivate a relationship. And then I finish it with saying, this is spiritual grit. See, because I'm thinking I'm writing a book called Spiritual Grit. I am not, but it is spiritual grit. I will check out the book Spiritual Grit that already exists. And I'll think of a new name. If you think of a name for my book that I'm cultivating, it's about creative expansion and becoming creatively free, finding your purpose, and overcoming creative stumbling blocks. That's kind of the main idea behind it, and tapping into these ideas of the power to do that is through the power of presence. So if you come up with a good idea of a book name better than Spiritual Grit, let me know, because I need it. I can't write Spiritual Grit Part 2, really. Anyway, bye. Have a great day.